The order came without warning. Captain Ryland sat inside the cold chamber of the Galactic Council. His body still marked by the battles of the last war. Scars ran down his neck and across his face. Reminders of every ship he had seen fall. The alien senators watched him in silence, their eyes glowing faintly blue in the dim light. Then the High Chancellor spoke, his voice sharp and calm. "Captain Ryland of Earth, you are to marry Princess Lyra of the Aelari Empire." Ryland blinked. Thinking he had misheard, he was a soldier, not a diplomat. But the alien continued, "This marriage will end the blood feud between our species. It is the will of the Council." Ryland's jaw tightened. He wanted to refuse, yet he knew Earth had no choice. The war had cost billions of lives, and peace was fragile like glass. He bowed his head, hiding the anger burning behind his eyes. When the meeting ended, an alien aide led him through crystal corridors that shimmered with alien light. Each wall seemed alive, pulsing softly, almost breathing. "Your fiancée awaits," the aide said with a polite hiss. Ryland's boots echoed as he stepped through the silver archway into a quiet garden bathed in moonlight. There she was. Princess Lyra sat beneath a tree whose leaves glowed faintly purple, her white hair flowing over her shoulders like a river of light. Her eyes were closed, her hands resting on her lap. At first, Ryland thought she was simply meditating. Then the aide whispered, "She was born blind. She sees only through touch and sound." Ryland froze. He had faced fleets, monsters, and death itself. But this moment felt stranger than any battle. He took a slow step forward, his voice low. "Princess Lyra," she turned her head slightly, smiling softly. "You walk heavily, Captain. A man who carries pain." Her voice was gentle, musical, almost human. He hesitated, unsure what to say. She reached out a hand toward him, her fingers trembling slightly without thinking. Ryland stepped closer and let her fingertips touch his cheek. Her touch was light as air, tracing the old scar that cut across his face. Her expression softened. "You have kind eyes," she whispered. He wanted to tell her she could not see them, but the words caught in his throat. For the first time in years, Ryland felt seen, not by eyes, but by something deeper behind them. Alien nobles whispered and chuckled. One of them muttered loudly, "A fitting pair, the blind and the broken." Ryland ignored them, but his fists clenched. Lyra tilted her head, sensing his anger. "Don't mind them, Captain. Their hearts are uglier than your scars." He couldn't help but smile a little. The moment was strange, fragile but real. Lyra continued softly, "They told me you are a war hero, the one who ended the siege of Vera Prime." Ryland nodded. "If you call surviving a victory, then yes." She frowned slightly. "You speak like a man who lost more than he won." He didn't answer, and she didn't press him. As the stars glimmered above them, the garden fell silent. Ryland looked around, guards, servants, and cameras surrounded them from every angle. It wasn't a meeting, it was a show, a public act meant to convince the galaxy that peace was real. But under that peace, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the smiles too forced. Later that night, when Ryland returned to his quarters, he found a sealed message waiting on his console. The sender was unknown. The text simply read, "She doesn't remember, they made sure of it." Ryland frowned, rereading the line again and again. What did it mean? Who didn't remember? And why did it sound like a warning? He looked at his reflection in the mirror, his scarred face half in shadow. A part of him wanted to believe the marriage could bring peace, but another part, the soldier's instinct, whispered that this was not peace and it was a trap. He remembered the way Lyra's fingers trembled when she touched his face, the way she seemed to sense emotions she couldn't see. There was something hauntingly strange about her, something beautiful and broken. He sat down heavily on the bed, thinking of Earth, of the men who died believing in victory. He had seen the galaxy's cruelty, yet nothing felt as heavy as this silent order to marry a woman who could not see. Outside his window, alien ships drifted like silent ghosts over the capital world. He whispered to himself, "They want peace, but they hide their crimes behind it, somewhere deep inside." He felt that Lyra knew more than she showed, that her blindness was not nature's fault, and that maybe, just maybe, her eyes had once seen something terrible, something worth erasing. He didn't know yet that the girl who couldn't see would soon reveal the galaxy's darkest truth, and that his marriage, meant to silence war, would instead awaken a storm no empire could stop. The morning after the decree, the palace was filled with whispers. Every alien noble spoke about the strange union between a scarred human and their blind princess. Some called it mercy, others called it mockery, but no one dared to speak in front of the Emperor, Lyra's father, whose word was law across 5 galaxies. Rylan walked beside Lyra through long, glowing corridors. The walls shimmered like frozen light. Humming softly with alien energy, she held his arm gently as they walked, trusting his steps more than her guards. "Does it bother you?" she asked quietly. "To marry someone who can't see you?" Rylan looked at her, unsure how to answer. "It's not sight that matters," he said finally. "It's what you feel," Lyra smiled faintly. "Then maybe I will see you better than anyone else." As they passed through the palace, Rylan noticed strange security drones floating near every door. They were armed, not to protect them but to watch them. His soldier's instincts sharpened. Something about this place felt wrong. The smiles of the servants were too stiff, their eyes always following him. Later, inside his quarters, Rylan opened the hidden message again. "She doesn't remember. They made sure of it." He stared at it for a long time. Who sent it, and what did Lyra not remember? He began to search through the palace data network, his Earth military training guiding him. But most files were sealed under royal encryption. That night, during a formal dinner, he watched Lyra's father carefully. The Emperor's voice was calm, but every word carried power. He spoke about peace, unity, and forgiveness. Yet his eyes were cold like glass. When he looked at Rylan, it wasn't with trust. It was with calculation, like a man hiding something under the mask of diplomacy. Lyra sat beside Rylan, silent and graceful. Every now and then she tilted her head, listening to the hum of the hall. When the orchestra played, she whispered softly, "The melody feels wrong, there's sadness under it." Her words made Rylan pause. She didn't see, yet she sensed what others missed after dinner. An alien servant quietly slipped a small data crystal into Rylan's hand. No words, just a brief nod. He hid it in his sleeve and returned to his room. When he inserted it into his console, the screen flickered and showed fragments of classified logs, dates, coordinates, and names of colonies that never existed on official maps. He scrolled further and froze. There it was, Project Eclipse, a secret weapon project authorized by the Alari Emperor himself. The file contained photos, destroyed worlds, ships reduced to dust, and a report that mentioned Lyra's name. The line read, "Subject Lyra witnessed the event. Memory suppression authorized." Rylan's breath caught. They had erased her memory, blinded her, not by disease, but by force, to hide what she had seen. He turned off the console, his heart pounding. If this was true, the so-called peace was a lie built on horror. He needed to tell Lyra. But how could he break something that fragile? She trusted him, and she was innocent and unaware of her father's crimes. The next day he found her sitting near the palace balcony, facing the sunrise she could not see. Her face glowed in the golden light, calm and distant. "Do you ever wonder why you were born blind?" he asked carefully. She smiled sadly. "They said it was fate. The stars chose me this way." He hesitated. "And do you believe them?" Her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her seat. "Sometimes," she whispered, "I feel like I used to see. I dream of colors, of faces, of fire, but when I wake up, it fades." Rylan's throat went dry. The memory suppression wasn't perfect. Fragments were returning. He sat beside her, his voice low. "Lyra, if you could see again, what would you want to look at first?" She turned her face toward him, her white eyes soft. "You," she said simply. "Because when I hear you, I feel safe." He looked away, fighting the mix of anger and tenderness in his chest. She didn't know she was a prisoner in her own life, but soon, someone else would make sure she never learned the truth. That night, when Rylan returned to his quarters, the door was half open. He entered carefully, every step silent, the lights flickered, and suddenly a figure stepped out of the shadows. A soldier, not human, not Alari, wearing a black mask and carrying a plasma blade. The intruder lunged, but Rylan moved faster, grabbing a chair and blocking the strike. They fought brutally, the sound of metal and energy echoing through the room. Finally, Rylan managed to disarm him and slam him against the wall. "Who sent you?" Rylan growled. The assassin's voice rasped. She must not remember if she remembers. "We all die," before Rylan could question more. The soldier pressed something on his wrist and vanished in a flash of light. Only ashes remained. Rylan stood there, breathing hard. his fists trembling. He looked at the empty space where the attacker had been. The warning echoed in his head again. If she remembers, we all die. He turned toward the window, looking at the distant alien city shining like a field of stars. Lyra was not just blind. She was the key to a secret that could destroy entire empires. And now he knew. Someone was willing to kill both of them to keep it buried. The palace was no longer safe. Rylan knew that the moment the assassin vanished into thin air, someone powerful wanted Lyra to stay blind, not just in sight. But in truth, he couldn't sleep that night, his mind burning with questions and fear. Outside his window, alien patrol ships floated silently through the mist, like ghosts guarding a secret too large to tell. At dawn, Rylan went to see Lyra. She was sitting in the garden again, her hands resting on her knees. Listening to the wind, he tried to act calm, but his body still trembled from the fight. She tilted her head. You didn't rest, did you? She asked softly. He smiled faintly. How do you know? Your heart sounds tired, she said, her voice full of quiet sadness. Rylan sat beside her, unsure where to begin. He wanted to protect her, but he also knew she had a right to the truth. Lyra, he said slowly, do you ever remember flashes of light, maybe? Screams or stars burning? She froze. Her breathing stopped for a second. How do you know about that? She whispered. He hesitated. I found something. Your name was in an old report. Lyra's hands shook. A report? Yes, he said quietly. It spoke about a project called Eclipse. At the sound of that name, her expression changed. Her face went pale, her body stiff. She held her head, groaning as if something inside her mind was breaking open. Rylan reached to help, but she gasped. Don't, I can see something. Flashes, light, fire, screaming. Her voice trembled, tears sliding down her cheeks. The memories she was never meant to recall were coming back. She saw cities burning, human ships torn apart by energy beams too powerful to be natural, and her father's voice commanding the test of the weapon, Project Eclipse. She saw him watching as human prisoners begged for mercy, then the bright light that took her sight forever. Lyra screamed, clutching her head. No, make it stop, please. Rylan held her tight, whispering, It's okay. It's over, but it wasn't over. Her eyes were changing. Glowing faintly blue beneath her closed lids, he stared in shock. Lyra, your eyes. She opened them slightly, and for the first time, a spark of light passed through her pupils. I can see shadows, she whispered, shaking. I can see you. He froze, unable to speak. Her vision wasn't clear, but something inside her had awakened. Whatever they had done to her was breaking. The suppressed memories and her blindness were tied together, and now both were unraveling. A loud alarm suddenly echoed through the palace. The guards rushed down the halls, shouting in their alien tongue. Rylan grabbed Lyra's hand. We have to move. She nodded weakly. Still disoriented, they ran through hidden corridors, past glowing pillars and marble halls filled with chaos. He could hear soldiers shouting, Find the human. The princess is compromised. They ducked into a storage chamber. Rylan locked the door and looked around for a way out. Lyra leaned against the wall, her eyes flickering with faint light. I remember now, she whispered, her voice trembling. They blinded me because I saw what my father did. He used the weapon on your people, Rylan. He killed millions. Rylan's chest tightened. I know, I saw the files. Lyra's tears glimmered. He said it was for peace, but it was for power. He placed a hand on her shoulder. We can expose him, we can tell the galaxy. She shook her head. No, they'll kill you before you even speak. And me too. Then we run, Rylan said, determination in his voice. There's an old transport dock under the palace. I saw it in the map. She hesitated, then nodded. If we run, there's no going back, he smiled grimly. I never planned to go back. They made their way through the dark maintenance tunnels. The sounds of distant pursuit echoed above them. Lyra's sight flickered in and out, but her other senses guided them better than his eyes. She stopped suddenly. There's someone ahead. A guard stepped out of the shadows. His weapon raised, Rylan moved faster. One strike, one silent hit, and the guard fell. Lyra flinched but said nothing, her voice trembling. You killed him. Rylan looked at her. I protected you. Finally, they reached the docking bay. Rows of small silver ships rested under soft blue lights. He helped her aboard one. Activating the controls, the engines hummed. power rising through the floor as they lifted off. The alarm roared across the capital. Dozens of drones took flight, chasing them into the dark sky. Rylan pushed the ship harder. Diving through plasma barriers, Lyra clung to the seat, whispering directions as if she could feel where safety was. Behind them, the royal fleet formed a pursuit line. "Rylan," she said softly, "if we die, thank you for letting me see the stars again." He smiled faintly, his eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. "We're not dying today." As the ship vanished into the void of space, Lyra opened her eyes once more, and for the first time, truly saw stars, endless and bright, scattered across the dark sea of the universe. Her sight had returned, but so had the pain of truth. And now, the blind princess could see too much. Enough to change the fate of the galaxy forever. The stolen ship drifted through the cold dark of space. The stars stretched endlessly around them, silent and bright, for the first time in her life. Princess Lyra saw them, truly saw them. She sat near the window, her white eyes now glowing softly with blue light. Her sight was weak but real, and every flicker of starlight filled her with tears. Rylan watched her quietly from the cockpit. He had seen battlefields, planets on fire, fleets torn apart, but nothing in the galaxy compared to the look on her face. A mixture of awe and sorrow, she whispered. "They told me light was dangerous." "But it's beautiful," he smiled faintly. "Light can hurt, but it also shows you the truth." They had escaped the capital, but the danger wasn't gone. Every communication channel was now flashing with their names. "Traitors to the Aelari Empire," the broadcast said. "Wanted alive or dead." Rylan shut down the signal receiver, his voice firm. "We need to stay off the grid. I know a derelict moon nearby. We can hide there." The ship landed hours later on a cold, barren moon. Its sky was dark gray, the air thin, the surface cracked like broken glass. They found shelter inside an abandoned research base. Dust covered the halls, but the system still worked weakly. "This will do," Rylan said, setting up energy shields. Lyra stood in the doorway, looking around nervously. "It feels like a grave," she whispered. He looked at her. "Then let's fill it with life again." Over the next few days, Rylan repaired the old systems while Lyra tried to adjust to her new vision. Sometimes her sight blurred, sometimes it vanished for hours, but she learned to trust both her eyes and her senses. One evening, as Rylan sat repairing a console, he heard her soft voice. "May I see you?" He turned slowly, unsure. "You already do." She shook her head. "No, not just with my eyes. I want to see your scars." He froze. No one had ever asked that, not even his own people. But Lyra walked closer, gently touching his face, tracing every line and mark. Her fingers trembled. "You carried so much pain, and they called you ugly for surviving it." He looked down, his voice low. "You won't like what you see." She smiled softly. "I already do." When she finally opened her eyes and looked at him, her vision cleared, and she gasped, not in horror but in wonder. "These scars," she said quietly, "they are proof you never gave up." For a moment, time stood still. A human soldier and a blind alien princess, both broken, both hunted. Yet in that lonely moonlit room, they were whole. She touched his hand. "You see the world with fear. I see it with sound and heart. Maybe that's why we found each other." He didn't answer. He simply held her hand tighter. Later, Rylan found the courage to open the remaining files from the data crystal. What he discovered froze his blood. Project Eclipse was far more than a weapon. It was a system designed to turn stars into black holes. The Emperor planned to use it against any world that refused his rule. It was pure annihilation, masked as peacekeeping technology. He called Lyra over. Showing her the data screens, her face went pale. He would destroy whole systems just to stay in power. Rylan nodded grimly. "And you were the only one who saw it happen." Her eyes filled with tears. "That's why he blinded me." She turned away, her hands shaking. "He was my father." Rylan placed a hand on her shoulder. "He was your ruler, not your father." The room fell silent for a long time. Then Lyra spoke, her voice steady now. "We have to expose the truth, not just for Earth, but for everyone." Rylan frowned. "If we broadcast this, every empire in the galaxy will turn against us." "I know," she whispered. "But they deserve to see, even if it costs us everything." That night, Rylan activated the old transmitter hidden in the base. Lyra stood beside him, her voice trembling but strong. She recorded a message. To all worlds under the Aelari Empire. You've been living under lies. My father created a weapon that consumes stars. He blinded me to hide the truth, but I can see now. And so must you. Rylan transmitted the message through every open frequency. Across colonies, fleets, and councils, moments later, hundreds of incoming alerts filled the screen. The Empire had detected the signal, and fleets were on their way. Rylan turned to her. We've started a war. She met his eyes without fear.
No, we've started the truth outside.
The night sky began to light up with approaching ships. Rylan powered up the base defenses, but they both knew they couldn't fight them all. He looked at her and said quietly, "If they catch us, they'll erase everything again." Lyra smiled sadly. "Then they'll have to blind the entire galaxy this time." The ground shook as plasma blasts hit the surface. Dust rained from the ceiling, alarms screamed through the halls. Rylan grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the escape ship. She looked back one last time at the console, still glowing with her message. "The truth is out there now," she whispered. "No one can stop it." As the ship lifted off into the burning sky, Rylan looked at her, the once blind girl who now saw clearer than anyone. And in that moment he realized she wasn't just a princess anymore, she was a spark. A light that even the darkest empire could not extinguish. The dark side of the moon burned as alien ships filled the sky. Blue fire streaked across the surface while Rylan's stolen vessel soared upward. Lyra sat beside him, her hands trembling, eyes glowing faintly with blue light. The broadcast had reached the entire galaxy, and now every empire was listening. But the Aelari fleet was closing in fast, determined to silence them forever. Rylan pushed the engines to their limit. "We can't outrun them for long," he said. Gripping the controls, Lyra's voice was calm. "We don't have to outrun them, we just have to finish what we started." She turned toward the glowing interface, her psychic senses reaching out to the old code of Project Eclipse. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The weapon isn't gone. It's still active somewhere near the star of Alien Prime." Rylan looked at her sharply. "That's your homeworld." She nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's where this must end." The ship's navigation system beeped as she entered new coordinates. "You're taking us to the capital," Rylan said in disbelief. Her expression was steady. "To stop a monster, we must walk into his shadow." Hours later, the ship dropped out of hyperspace near Alien Prime. A massive fleet of golden warships surrounded the planet like a crown of fire. The Emperor's command ship floated at the center, a fortress of steel and light. Before Rylan could react, a booming voice filled the comm channel. "Princess Lyra," it said coldly, "you've shamed your bloodline, but I will forgive you if you return now." Lyra leaned forward. "Father, forgive yourself first and for the worlds you murdered." There was silence. Then the Emperor's tone hardened. "You remember then," he said quietly. "I blinded you so you would never see what I became." Tears filled her eyes. "And still I see you clearer than ever." Rylan locked the ship's weapons, his voice firm. "If he fires, we fight." But Lyra shook her head. "No, fighting him means becoming him. There's another way." She reached out with her mind, connecting to the hidden core of Project Eclipse. The weapons systems responded, deep inside a forbidden satellite orbiting the nearby star. Rylan watched in awe as symbols and codes appeared across the dashboard. Lyra's voice trembled. "He used my DNA to seal the weapon. That means only I can unseal it." Rylan's eyes widened. "You can control it." She nodded. "Or destroy it." The Emperor's voice thundered again. "Lyra, stop. That weapon maintains the balance of power. You will doom us all." Her hands glowed brighter as she whispered, "No, Father. You doomed us long ago." The weapon began to awaken, energy surging toward the star. Rylan looked out the window. The sun itself was trembling. "Lyra, if you trigger it wrong, it'll collapse the whole system," he warned. She smiled softly. "That's why I need you with me." As the fleets closed in, Rylan took the controls, weaving through incoming fire. Lyra sat perfectly still, her mind inside the weapons network, her eyes glowing like twin stars. Images flashed in her mind, the destroyed worlds, the screams of children, her father's proud face, and through it all, she heard Rylan's voice, calm and steady. "You're not alone, Lyra, you never were." Then she saw something beautiful. Inside the weapon's core there was a reflection of her younger self. Blind, afraid, alone, that version of her smiled gently. "You can see now, so show them light." A tear fell down her cheek as she whispered, "Goodbye." Outside, the Emperor's fleet fired everything they had. But before the blasts could reach Ryland's ship, the weapon released its energy. A wave of white light spread across space, blinding every sensor, every eye, every star. But it didn't destroy him when it cleansed. The weapon's core burned itself out, turning into a collapsing halo that erased its own data forever. Project Eclipse was gone when the light faded. Ryland's ship floated silently among the wreckage. The Emperor's voice came faintly over the comm, weak and broken. "What have you done, daughter?" Lyra's voice was calm. "I've done what you couldn't. I've opened my eyes." The signal died, and the giant command ship drifted without power. Its rule ended. The galaxy watched in silence. Messages from hundreds of worlds poured in, some in fear, some in awe. They called her the blind saint, the one who destroyed the weapon of gods. But Lyra didn't hear them. She sat quietly beside Rylan. Her strength fading, he turned to her, his voice breaking. "Lyra, stay with me." She smiled weakly. "You gave me the stars, Rylan. Now I can finally rest." He held her close as her glowing eyes dimmed. In her final breath, she whispered, "Light isn't just what we see, it's what we believe." The ship drifted into the endless night, carrying the legend of a blind girl who saw the truth. Years later, across alien worlds and human colonies, people still spoke her name. They said she turned blindness into hope, and war into peace, and that somewhere beyond the stars, the scarred human and the blind alien girl still watched over the galaxy, together. Because love, like light, never dies, it only changes form.